Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a first submission by Julie with her horse Taz. Taz is a 4-year-old, but even though he's 4, I've evidently had been ridden quite a bit and on the trail sort of thing by someone before she got the horse. I don't know exactly what this horse's breeding is. It's only about 14 hands, but we'll just have to all guess about that. But it looks like a nice sort. Obviously, this is the kind of horse that has a very thick neck. These kinds of horses can be, and she says in the email that the horse's mouth is kind of like steel, which doesn't surprise me. Often these horses like this that get ridden, by people who really don't understand how to start horses, and they have those thick necks, and they can just really turn into a pulling machine, so to speak. But you're on the right track now to solve that problem. But you can see, once again, look at the horse as it goes by, and you see behind the saddle there, even though this horse is quite short back, it's quite dipped behind the saddle there, which tells me that the horse has never really been working over its back. And you can see that its muscling is all on the other side of its neck. And with a neck like that, this is the kind of horse that people start riding and bracing on, and I'm sure they just deaden the horse's mouth. So it's a matter of going back to the beginning, as we always do, and just starting again, and this is the way you do it on the lunge line. Now, she does say that the horse is usually better than it is here. Obviously, we'd like to see the horse stretch into the contact with that bridle a little more. The one thing I would suggest, seeing how you're doing this, which often works with this type of horse, is just be sure and put the side reins on low, that is along the side of the horse, not up by the saddle, but down a little bit lower. We just want the horse to feel a little bit of pressure when it puts its head all the way up, and sometimes these kind of short-necked horses like this, they can kind of get their heads up. So we do want them to feel a little contact. Once again, we're never trying to force the horse's head and neck into position, but we do want the horse to feel the contact when it pulls his head up, and that will help them to want to move away from that contact by stretching into the ground. But this horse is a pretty nice mover for what I see here, even though he's quite hollow here still. He looks like he's got a pretty nice back end on him, that when you get him over his back, he's certainly going to improve his movement, and to a great deal, I would say. Very often these kind of horses get ridden very short, and they can kind of look like their hind legs can't flex at all, but you get them actually moving out like this. There's a horse very similar to this on our website. I think the name of the video is Your Horse May Surprise You, and it was one like this that once we got it over its back, it was so striking to see the difference in how it had moved. And I'm sure that will be the same case with this one. Once again, as you see when it comes by there close to the camera, you can see that dip behind the saddle that I'm talking about that tells me the horse's back has never learned to lift and carry weight. So that is basically the issue, and that's really the basically issue whether you're doing dressage or not. That's what dressage is teaching the horse to work over its back. If you're not teaching the horse to work over its back, you're not really doing dressage. You're maybe pattern riding. You may be able to get horses to do all kinds of fancy things with their backs hollow. But as someone once said about there was a trainer named James Phyllis who taught horses to do all kinds of strange things, but as another great riding master said about him, it was interesting music but played on horribly out-of-tune instruments, and that's what happens when the horses aren't working over the back. The instruments are terribly out of tune, and it never looks very comfortable. Though I'm continually surprised at how, in today's world, people are ignoring the uncomfortableness of the horses and beginning to think that it's all right to see that, and that's the mindset that we need to change, Dressage, going back to its origins, was the idea of a way of training horses without the force, where we could become better in partnership with them, by training them in such a way that we actually listen to them and try to understand what they're feeling and develop their bodies in the best possible way. So when you see supposed dressage, then it just seems to be people fighting and whipping on horses and pulling their heads down. It's got to make you wonder, is that basic thing that must be there, which is a sense of respect for the animals themselves and giving them the time to develop correctly, that has to be there. This is looking better, though, as he's going along here. I saw a nice stretch in the walk there for 1 minute there for a second. And once again, don't forget to do that. If the horse will stretch in the walk, and only in the walk, keep coming back to the walk. In time, the horse will stretch in the trot. But, You know, there's some horses, and these kind of thick-necked horses can be like that, where they'll just, you know, gone around their whole lives like that, and you know, they just don't know anything different. So giving them that time to really stretch out in the walk is really important with this types of horse. Just like we say when we ride, our rule of thumb is we never ride a horse that we can't get on and stretch it. If we can't get on and stretch it, it needs the groundwork before we get up there, because otherwise you're asking the horse to do something, its back isn't up, and then you're going to put weight on top of it and ask it to lift it. And if the back is weak, there's no way the horse is going to be able to do it. You know, and that's where people start using whips and things to try to get the hindquarters under, but that only makes the horse tense. And yes, the hindquarters will be under, but the horse will be tense, which will lead to all kinds of injuries to the horse. So that's the biggest thing. Just like with, you know, think about it yourself as an athlete. You know, you don't want tension. It destroys everything. Now, the one thing I do want to say about your lunging here, I mean, you're doing a pretty good job of this, but I would really get rid of all this stuff that you've got in the ring. I really don't like to see that. I mean, maybe those little cones if you want to work around those cones, but I would definitely get rid of that mounting block. It would only take a few moments of you know, not realizing where you were, or something were to go wrong with the horse. You know, something suddenly happened, the horse bolts, which happens. You know, you could soon be over the top of that and falling down over it. So I would definitely get that mounting block out of your arena. I mean, I don't like to have anything in the arenas when I lunge. I don't like those little cones or anything else. I just like to have a clear space that there's nothing for the horse to run into or over or end up jumping over. So were it I would get everything out of there, and even if it's not me, I would definitely get that mounting block out of your way there, because once again, like right there when you came by it, if suddenly he had spooked, he would have drug you right over the top of that, and then you would have been on your head and on the ground, so which is something, and he would have been loose running around the arena, or worse, you could have been tied up in the line. So let's get those obstacles out of your way while you're lunging. Other than that, you're doing quite a nice job with the lunging. You're keeping him at the end of the line, which is good, and you seem to be able to control him. That's good. That is, you're keeping him where you want him to be, and that's very nice. You're staying at the top of the triangle, formed by your left hand in this case, and your right, and your whip in your right. So that's good. We still want to see him stretching more, and the best stretch that I've seen has been in the walk work. So were it I would come back to the walk sooner. Now, I don't know if you've tried using the shambone on this horse or not, or if you even have one. I can't tell from this picture here. But I would definitely spend more time walking, because that seemed to be the place where he could. You can see right here he's just kind of bracing against this. So we've either got to get a little more give, or we need to come back to the walk and just let him walk and stretch in that walk for a longer period of time. But once again, the things I really like are how you're keeping him out at the end of the line. That's really good. I like how you're keeping the whip facing the horse. Once again, I like the way this horse moves. When you do get him over his back, he's going to be really a nice horse. You know, a lot of this type of horse can be really straight behind, so this one doesn't seem to be too much that way, so that's a good thing. And he is starting to soften there a little bit for you. Now, you might actively just bring him in a little bit more, which may help you to get him to bend. You know, I always kind of like to think about doing a little bit of shoulder in on the circle. So if you think about bringing him a little closer to you, which means you have to walk a little more with him, and try to get him to yield his hindquarters away from you a little more. So that, in other words, he's moving in more of a shoulder in position on the lunge line. Now, when he does that, that will get him to step deeper under his body with that inside hind leg, and usually will help to get them over their backs. As the deeper they get that leg underneath, the more it pushes up through the back. So you might try that a little more. That is, bringing him onto that shoulder in position a little more, working him a little closer to you so you can do that. And then as soon as he relaxes, like this is really nice in the walk. He's coming back to the walk here, and this is very nice. He's starting to stretch into it much better. So I feel like if you stay on course here, you're going to get there with this horse in time. I would do lots of this walk work and spend a lot of time in it. If he'll get soft like that and stretch into it, good. The more time he spends in it at the walk, the better he'll be. There, that's nice. That's starting to look really good there. Once again, I like how even at the walk, he's staying out there on the circle. But you can do that same thing of the shoulder in, you know, once again, and once again, a reason for having all those cones and all that stuff out of your way, because you don't want that. You start to do a little shoulder in, and all of a sudden you got something in your way. So definitely for safety's sake, I would get rid of all of that stuff. It really doesn't serve much purpose, and a lot of people would do it to sort of give them an idea to keep the horse out on the circle, but You're doing a good job of that, so I don't really think you need those cones to help you with any of that. And once again, we don't like if we put him into a shoulder in, then he's not looking where he's going. He hits one of those cones and trips over. See, like that, all that did was interrupt your stride. You don't want the horse going over something like that. Now, if you want to lunge him over something, lunge him over a flat pole on the ground, you know, so he's got something and it's wide enough so he's not avoiding it. Because if you need to decide what you want the horse to go over. And something as tiny as a cone, once again, you're doing a good job of controlling this, but you never know. So I'd like to see if you want to trot him over something, there's nothing wrong with doing a single trotting pole on the ground on a circle. It's very, very good, but get a 12-foot wide pole. And then even with that, I would put a guide pole. That is, I would have one pole the horse is going over and a little bit of a guide, like a chute on the inside. So in case the horse steps over, that's nice. And you do a good job of stepping him over that. But it kind of interrupted his rhythm there a little bit. So remember, whenever we do anything, when we add poles and things like that, we don't want to do it unless the horse stays over his back. Now, there at the walk, just stepping over that cone there for you, he did kind of look down, but he lost the rhythm. So, the most important thing that we teach a horse is to lock into a rhythm and stay there. So, something as undefined on the ground as this little cone thing, it's just too confusing. And see, all he did was hollow when he came up to that. So that just totally interrupted your stride and undid the good work that you're doing, because that's not what you want him to do. So unless you can keep him round over the back, you don't want to be going over anything. That's why you don't want to be going over anything for a little while. That time he ignored it a little more, but he still threw his head up and hollowed. So that's counterproductive to what we want, which is the horse to learn to get over his back and stay over his back. So once again, word I, same thing here. He's still a little hollow here. I get the feeling you could just, you could maybe take those side reins a little bit tighter, but what I'm suggesting is you put them lower, not tighter. So I'd like to see you just put them around the girth and let them come all the way down, like around the horse's, down to as low as they'll go on the side of the horse around the girth. Just put them all the way around the girth. It's just the way this horse is made. He can kind of turtle his neck back and throw his head up and, and sort of negate the rein. So if you put them lower, it'll have a better effect on him in terms of where it acts on the bars in his mouth for this type of a horse. In fact, I did one just like this today that I needed to do just that thing with, and it made all the difference in the world. He was going around, and I felt like this one I was doing today would have gone for a long, long time, which is kind of done. I put the side reins lower, and within a couple of seconds, he was stretching right into it. So highly suggest that. And once again, it would be a good idea not to have those stirrups flopping on the side of the horse, which I see on the outside has fallen down. So getting a good system for tying those up, or they make these little bags that you can put over that the stirrups go in, which keeps your saddles from getting rubbed, which is also a good idea, because that's the trouble with tying your saddles up. But they make a nice little sock thing that's kind of, it's got a pouch on either side. You put the stirrups into them. But we don't want them banging on the side of the horse. Now, sometimes we'll do that with a young green horse that's gotten very spooky about being touched, But generally we don't, because anything banging, just like your leg, is going to make him go dead to his side. So we don't want something constantly banging on the side of the horse. And if they're at the right angle, they can also do a lot of injury to the horse's elbows. Now yours are higher than the elbows are, but sometimes people will have them lower, and the horse starts to move his legs, and he's getting whacked on that point of that elbow with the metal stirrup, which can actually lame a horse up pretty good. So once again, the walk looks pretty nice here. So I would spend a lot of time at this walk. Yeah, so I would spend more time than you're spending at the walk, just to get him, and really get him there and let him be just really relaxed and stretched down. Spending a little more time though. But I think that if you change the side reins the way I'm suggesting and just put them lower and just around the girth, I think it will help you also to get him there a little quicker. Because remember, a whole goal, and this is the whole idea of stretching him in the walk first. I mean, every step we take with the horse upside down, that is hollow in the back or dropped to the back, just encourages him to continue working that way. So we want to sort of get that out of the whole horse's lexicon of thinking. When we're on it, we want it to think, oh, you need to be stretching into the contact and lifting your back, So that's why we start at the walk, and if we can get it at the walk. Or if we can't get it at the walk, we lunge until we can, so we have enough strength. Some horses are just so weak in the back, as soon as you put a rider on them, they just collapse and there's nothing they can do. The longer the back they are, the weaker it is. So we talk about these various breeds. Like a lot of big people buy Friesians, but they're very, very long back. They actually take more strength than this horse. Almost every Friesian I see is sway backed, and that's why, because these big people buy them thinking because they're big that they can carry their weight. But the reality is they are so big themselves, and their backs are so long, and once again, they weren't originally designed for being ridden. You know, the back just kind of collapses out from underneath them as soon as you put weight on them. So actually, a heavy person would be much better off on a smaller horse that's stouter. But the best thing they can do is go to the gym and get fit to ride horse. Because if you're not fit to ride, you know, you're a danger to yourself and others. You'll never be a better rider than you are fit. Always remember that. Now this is looking better. He's starting to stretch into this a little better. People ask me all the time, what's the best thing I can do to improve my riding? Go to the gym. Get shape. Better shape you are, the easier it is. Just like any other sport. You have to train to be a rider. I like the way he comes back. And I like to see that walk swinging a little more active. But I do like a lot of things about this horse. It'll be interesting to see him come along. And you'll see how his back will change once you really get him working through his back and he gets uphill. Once again, remember it takes 2 years. So whether you're starting with a 4-year-old or you're starting with a 2-year-old or you're starting with a 20-year-old that's never been trained correctly, it takes about 2 years for the horse's back to go through the process of developing a top line for the withers to pull up through the shoulders. Once again, if you'd like a real explanation of this scientifically, I highly suggest you read Gerd Hirschman's books on the subject, which are very good modern books on the subject. You can also read the great book, The Way to Perfect Horsemanship by Udo Berger, who was a German Olympic rider and veterinarian. Phenomenal book, one of the best books on the subject. So none of this information is new. That's what I try to tell people all the time. This information has always been out there. It's just that, you know, people started not reading or something and believing their local heroes. A lot of people tell me that, oh, I'm studying dressage and my trainer told me not to read books, that I'd only be confused. Well, if your trainer tells you not to read books and can't suggest some that are going to go along with their method, I suggest you look for another trainer because, you know, if you read all the good books on the subject, they all pretty much say the same things. You know, the ones that are actually written by people who are actually trainers and have trained, you know, many upper-level horses. Unfortunately, there's a lot of books out there that are just sort of hypotheses by people who have never really done the thing they're talking about, but, you know, have, and they're just kind of talking about ideas. Those books can tend to be very confusing. But, you know, if you read the ones by the real trainers, Klaus Bachenhall, Udo Berger, you know, the kind of people who've really done the work in the past, you know, the Spanish Riding School's manual, which was not written by Alice Padaisky, just so you all know, even though he put his name on it. It was the Spanish Riding School's manual. Or in the manuals of the other schools, Mafra in Portugal, for instance, the Cadenoir in France, they're all looking at the same things. We're all universities of learning about horses. That's why I always laugh when somebody tells me they've come up with something new about horses. They just have rediscovered something. But, you know, the world used to run on horseback, and every country in the world had universities like the Spanish Riding School that were devoted to figuring out how best to use horses, as the world and militaries all went on horseback. But so everything has been tried, you would probably find. I find there's very little new under the sun. So you can go all the way back to Xenophon the Greek, who laid down our foundations talking about what dressage is, which was the first Renaissance, so to speak, that we had in horses. And then 4,000 years later, you know, we had the next one during the 1600s. So when we got away from the brutal methods. Unfortunately, some of the brutal methods have been creeping back into dressage, and that's what we all must fight all the time. I talk to people all the time about this, and everyone needs to talk about it. You know, everyone for years now has been afraid to say anything about dressage. You know, we all had to keep a happy face about it all. But it's time we all started realizing what it really is and get back to the horses enjoying themselves in this work. So, which this one looks to be doing. That's a pretty nice walk you got there. Once again, even though he's not as round as I'd like him to be, it's coming in the right direction. His walk is not too bad. So he's a little stiff there. And remember to keep your turns very big and wide. Now see, once again, that would be too sharp of a turn to make with a horse like this. So remember, any turn you make with a young horse should be a quarter of the largest circle it can maintain the rhythm on. So in this horse's case, it's probably about a 20-meter circle. So keep your circles wider. Let the rhythm guide you. Remember, if the horse loses the rhythm, the horse wasn't prepared well enough to do this exercise. So let's work on that rhythm a little bit more. So thinking about that. So this exercise here, he's too bent in the neck. While the rein back was not bad, he wasn't really on the bridle and wasn't really over his back. So once again, that was more of a, he pulled his head up and hollowed. So would that be really worth doing? Probably not, because it sort of emphasized what the problem is already. So when a horse reins back correctly, it reins back from correct contact in the stretch, and it maintains the position over its back and doesn't throw its head up into the air, which comes pretty late in training, usually after a year or so before we even begin to start reining back. So reining back really serves no purpose other than that. And when you see trainers who constantly stop and rein back, constantly stop and rein back, they think they're balancing the horse, but what they're really doing is just slowing the horse down. And when they move out, it gives them a false impression of balance because the horse is now just going slowly. But if they really, as soon as that same horse opens up and tries to open its gates into real gates, everything just falls apart. So once again, let the back guide what you do. So, once again, if you can't make a turn without losing the rhythm, keeping the horse over its back, then that turn really didn't have much value. So think about that in your turns, in your written work, in your riding work. I'd like to see your circles much bigger. These are too small a turns. There's a nice little leg yield there happening like that. Keep it wide. So once again, you're riding, you want to get him stretching a little deeper. It's a little better, but it's more kind of dragging him back. I would stay away from the rein backs. Don't have a big purpose. So your walk there is a little better there, and he's getting his swing a little bit more actively. Though that last rein back was certainly better than the first one that you did. But it doesn't really have a lot of place in a horse at this level. Once again, too small a turn. See how he lost his back end? So much bigger turns. This kind of thing just doesn't do anything. Except now he's kind of spinning around on his forehand. So I need you to make much wider turns with your horses. Remember, let the rhythm and the position of the back guide your training, and you'll get there. So bigger turns with more rhythm, that you don't lose the rhythm. Keep it wide. But good work. He looks like he has a lot of potential. I look forward to seeing the next one. Keep it to the walk, stretching much, much more in the walk before you go to the trot. And same thing, whether you're mounted or not, lower those side reins down and see if that doesn't help you keep him more consistent. This is Will Faerber from Art to Ride. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful working with you today. And he looks like a very pleasant fellow there. He's having a good time. I would suggest you just take that saddle off, though, in the future before you let him go. A lot of horses will just drop and roll when you do that, just to give you a warning, just so you don't lose a saddle, and I have seen people lose them. And that same thing, now that you're getting that gear out of there, let's keep it out of there from now on. And just have an open feel so you don't have these obstacles. If you want to lunge him over something, a pole on the ground. Okay, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing your next submission.